There's a drug epidemic in Saskatchewan. Opioid and methamphetamine addictions are on the rise, but access to treatment can be limited and the treatment itself insufficient. I'm Bonnie Allen. In this program, we'll examine cracks in the system and the toll on drug users, their families, and the community. We begin with desperate parents who say they were forced to seek private treatment for their drug-addicted children, draining their retirement savings, remortgaging houses, sinking deep into debt. An expensive gamble they say they shouldn't have had to take. As a mother, Ronnie Nordal has always been willing to do anything for her son Andrew. She spent the first 2 years of his life feeding him through a tube after he was born missing part of his esophagus.
This is Andrew's grade 12 grad picture.
Nordal never imagined her son would become addicted to cocaine and crystal methamphetamine.
He struggled at school. He wasn't really happy at school. And I think by grade 10, unknown to me at the time, he was using drugs.
Andrew admits he would do anything to get his fix.
I started stealing. I started manipulating my family for money, do whatever it took. I was dealing drugs. I was breaking in drug dealers' houses to get the drugs.
His teeth were rotting out. Meth rots your teeth out. He'd lost a ton of weight. He had lost almost every friend he'd had.
Nordal tried desperately to get him help. She got him into a 28-day drug treatment program in Saskatchewan 3 times, but he would quickly relapse.
Especially for something like crystal meth, the 28 days just isn't enough, and in fact, you may still be feeling the effects of the drugs.
Then she got the call. Andrew had overdosed.
My son was in grave condition, had been put in a medically induced coma, and was intubated, so was on a ventilator.
He survived, and Nordal says she finally believed her son had a chronic disease.
He wanted to stop, he wanted to do better, but at that point, we didn't know what to do.
He was snorting pills, yeah.
Stacey Bereza has felt the same frustration.
He was using heroin here, and I didn't know.
Her son Caden experimented with painkillers in a medicine cabinet and moved on to heroin and fentanyl.
I said, Caden, I'm not oblivious to the fact that the path you're on is going to ultimately end in death.
Bereza is a 911 dispatcher who handles drug overdose calls almost nightly. She was determined that wouldn't be her son's fate, but she wasn't impressed by treatment options in the province.
28 days does nothing. I mean, you're getting over the detoxing, but you don't have the tools to move forward in being healthy. 28 days is like, okay, your detox, we'll do a little bit of group therapy, and then boom, you're done.
Saskatchewan's Ministry of Health says it has 350 treatment beds, but many are just for detox. Others are only 28-day programs. And there are only 9 beds in the entire province dedicated to long-term residential treatment. That extends to 90 days. Dr. Peter Butt is an addictions expert who says 28 days is not enough.
28 days is what American life insurance companies or health insurance companies would pay for recovery services down in the States. That's it. And so the programs were modeled based upon the funding structure. It had nothing to do with efficacy, nothing to do with evidence, nothing to do with outcome.
Butt says 3 months of individualized treatment should be the minimum, followed by transitional support programs and counseling that extends to at least a year. That's rarely available in the public system anywhere in Canada. So, what is a parent to do?
Pray.
Bereza decided to take an expensive gamble. She booked her son into a privately run rehab facility in Nanaimo, BC.
I said, don't do it for me. Like, that's a waste of your time. Don't do it for me, do it for you. If you don't want this, I'm done. I've done all I can do. I've held you. I've wiped your sweat, your brow, cleaned you when you were a mess through detox. I'm not doing that again. Okay, mom, I'll go. Okay, you're serious. You want to do this? I want to do this, mom. I can't live like this anymore.
The price tag, $10,000 a month. She cashed in her entire retirement savings, sinking into debt.
My son wasn't my son for years, and this was the hope of getting my boy back.
Nordal made the same decision for her son Andrew.
He was going to die if he didn't do something. And at that point too, as a parent, I knew I was sick. I was exhausted. I had lost weight. His dad and I had a discussion. We both loved him with all our hearts, but at some point we were going to have to not have him in our life. And we came to the conclusion that to be okay with ourselves, we're going to try one more thing.
But there are no guarantees. Private facilities are generally unregulated.
As someone phoning, you don't know if it's a gimmick. You don't know if they have qualified anything.
In total, Andrew did 5 months of intensive residential rehab, then several more months of transitional care with counseling and group therapy. It cost $40,000. But so far so good. He's been clean for 2.5 years.
And she's like, as long as you stay clean, the money doesn't matter. She was right there beside me, wanting nothing more than her son back in her life.
28 days isn't enough. When someone finally says, I need help, they need help then and now. And it shouldn't depend whether your parents or grandparents or family can pay. It should just be available.
I said, it's not day by day anymore, buddy. It's literally minute by minute.
Bereza's son had 3 relapses in BC, but he's been clean for nearly 3 years. In total, his private treatment has cost $82,000.
Credit cards, line of credit. It's a monthly financial crunch. I feel it monthly, but I look at my son's smile today and it was worth it.
2 mothers who never imagined their baby boys would become addicted to drugs or that help would be so hard to find. Both would rather be broke than brokenhearted. As you heard from Ronnie Nordal and Stacey Bereza, paying for private drug treatment is a financial burden. But they acknowledge how privileged they are to even be able to find the means, even if it meant racking up debt. For other parents, it's not even an option. Regina mother Cheryl Deshane shares how hopeless and heartbreaking that can be.
He thought that he was invincible. Thought he was the best goalie ever.
Cheryl Deshane says her son Jordan was always a little rough around the edges.
He loved being with family and his buddies, and he was a bit of a badass. He liked trouble.
Jordan first experimented with crack cocaine when he was 13.
When it was very clear what his addiction was and stuff, I would go looking for him in drug houses. And no one wants mama rat-tat-tatting at their door, especially when she's mad, right? It's not funny, but if I did not have a sense of humor, Bonnie, I would not have made it. I literally would not have made it through, I swear to God.
It wasn't long before Jordan was in and out of youth detention facilities, then later prison. But his mother says there were cries for help.
At 3 a.m, he would call me, probably when he's out of money, out of drugs. Mom, can you come pick me up? Yeah, absolutely. Off I would go, pick him up in some random place, and he'd be sobbing and crying and saying, I can't do this anymore. I hate it. I'm sad. I don't like it. I'm scared. Mom, what do I do?
Deshane says she could get her son into a detox facility, but not a residential treatment center.
So he's detoxed for 9 days, and then he has to wait somewhere, white knuckling it, for 6 weeks to get into a treatment center. What was the point? What was the point of the detox? Right? it's such a disjointed system. So as a mom on the phone, I spent a lot of time swearing. Like, are you kidding me right now? And when they want help, when they're reaching out for help, it's like now or never. Because you wait a day, you wait 2 days, that idea has left their mind.
For her, expensive private treatment wasn't an option.
I was a single mom for the most part. I could not afford to spend, upwards of $10,000, usually much more, to send my kid out of province. Would I have done it? In a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. I keep Jordan's picture beside my bed, and typically I say goodnight to him every night. Every now and again I call him a jerk or something for leaving me.
Deshane's son died from an overdose 4 years ago. Jordan had just been released from the Regina Correctional Center.
I also keep Jordan's ashes. In his urn says his name, Jordan Allen Bundas.
She is speaking out in her son's memory, demanding publicly funded, on-demand, long-term drug treatment. Coming up after the break, crystal meth addiction and what's being called a zombie apocalypse in Saskatchewan.
You're just walking around, you have no soul.
Welcome back. We're taking a deeper look at the toll of drug use in Saskatchewan and what's being done about it. Experts say the public health system is ill-equipped to deal with crystal meth addictions. The drug is cheap and easily available. The high is intense and long-lasting. Users unpredictable and highly volatile. That was recently highlighted when a video emerged in Saskatoon court that showed a man on a week-long meth binge light himself on fire. CBC's Dan Zakreski shows us what happened.
Yeah, copy. Everything's being recorded right now.
Yes, he has just lit himself on fire.
Rewind 2 hours to when Terrence Morin was spotted by police in a stolen SUV.
Air support unit has eyes on it in his primary. It's up to 22nd Street West and it's turning into oncoming traffic on 22nd Street West.
Lots of traffic. This is not good.
Again, just about went head on to another vehicle. He's pulling over at Diefenbaker Drive into oncoming traffic. He's going southbound on Diefenbaker, almost hit an oncoming vehicle.
This guy's going to kill somebody.
Morin leaves the city and the pursuit moves to grid roads north of Saskatoon.
He hears you coming. He's running back to the vehicle.
And into farmyards where he tries to refuel and is cornered by RCMP.
You're coming right around him. That's him right there. Box him in.
The chase ends with the SUV stuck in a field.
They've got a life and death situation here.
Thanks to fast action by the RCMP, Morin escapes with minor burns.
Okay, please.
Dan Zakreski, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Terrence Morin was sentenced to 2 years less a day in jail. Police and health workers say crystal meth users are a threat to themselves and the community.
Meth is absolutely a driver of crime in our community. We see that day in and day out. People that have an addiction to what is one of the most highly addictive drugs that we've seen in modern time will do whatever they need to do to be able to fuel that addiction. People with addiction are sick, they have an illness, however they engage in high-risk behavior they might not normally engage in order to try and feed that addiction. So things like committing robberies tied back to meth addiction.
The term zombie apocalypse has emerged as a fitting description, as some crystal meth users say they feel like the Walking Dead. 33-year-old Tiffany Newby is a recovering meth addict who sat down with me for a frank conversation about how she transformed from a popular high school student to a criminal so consumed by her addiction that crystal meth was all she cared about.
So I was about 15 years old when I got into it. And before that, I was experimenting with other kind of drugs, and it just kind of escalated to crystal meth by the time I was about 15. A sense of power, you can accomplish anything, you have this kind of, just like you can do anything, you have that kind of attitude and that kind of feeling, and you could take on the world, it feels like.
How quickly does that change?
It changes very quickly. I remember telling my alcohol and drug counselor in high school that it was just a weekend thing, that it wasn't going to be any, just for fun and kind of feel good. And I remember within a month or less, I was like, I would say a full-blown addict, and kind of like looking back, I could see how quickly it ruined my life. And
So when you said it quickly ruined your life, what does that look like?
previous to getting into drugs, I was really involved in extracurricular activities. I was really close with my family. We have a family cabin. I spent time out there. I was doing pretty good in school. Just kind of really naturally good at everything. And then as soon as I got into drugs, I was involved with the law, kind of the wrong crowd. Didn't go to school anymore. Just kind of, racking up charges and in and out of court. And even before, even before the last high would wear off, you're thinking, how can you get money for your next high? What can we do? Who can we steal from? Who can we rob? The ways that it affected me is, even if I'd be walking past somebody and they'd be nothing about me, they'd be minding their own business, random people on the street, and in my head I'd think that they were talking about me.
We hear about these week-long meth binges, people being awake for 7 days without sleeping. Did you experience that?
Yeah, all the time. I would say every binge I went on, I was at least awake. The minimum 4 days I would stay awake, and then up to a week all the time. So you're still the body that's you, even though you're skinny and you kind of get the meth sores and stuff, but you're just walking around. You have no soul is the best way to explain it. You're not who you used to be. It takes all your happiness. You're just a shell of who you used to be, pretty much. Even with all the charges and what I was going through, I still just was like, no, I'm not. It's not that bad. I don't have a needle in my arm, so it's not that bad. I'm not standing on the street selling my body, so I was convincing myself that it wasn't that bad. The point I did decide to get clean, though, was when my mom, we found out that she had terminal cancer and she was going to die. And I don't know, I finally realized that we knew she was going to die. The last 5 years, I pretty much put her through hell with everything I was doing. And that's when I decided I had to do it pretty much for her, is the reason I quit. And it ended up working. So when she passed away, I was clean, and I haven't touched drugs since then.
Coming up, the province reacts to criticism that the system is failing. Welcome back. Earlier in the program, we heard from Dr. Peter Butt, a leading addictions expert in Saskatchewan. He says 28-day treatment programs aren't long enough to help people overcome drug addictions.
I would suggest that we're setting them up for failure. The people that are successful are heroes in my mind. They get better in spite of us quite frequently, not because of what the system provides them with.
Dr. Butt says drug addicts need individualized treatment that spans at least a year. Now, that doesn't all have to be in a residential facility. He says addicts should receive transitional support in the community to learn healthy behaviors and how to cope with triggers. Saskatchewan's Director of Mental Health and Addictions, Kathy Willerth, answers questions about gaps in the system.
So we have some treatment centers that don't really have any wait time at all, and then we have some treatment centers that we're identifying over the last couple of years, treatment wait times of up to 4 to 6 weeks. And those treatment centers are the ones that we saw announcements in this year's budget for increased treatment beds.
And those centers, Calder Centre and Pine Lodge, those are primarily 28-day programs with a bit of flexibility, I know, for a couple more weeks. Why do we continue to stick to the 28-day model?
So I don't know that we're sticking to the 28-day model as much as that is an average treatment time, that month long, with, as you say, the ability to adapt as necessary. So that's one of the things that we're seeing change over the last little while, is an increased average length of stay in both detox and treatment.
Peter Butt, who is a leading addictions expert, he says that the 28-day model came from the States and was based on what health insurance would cover, and it's not based on outcomes or effectiveness. And yet, for the majority of the inpatient programs, advertise themselves at 28 days. So I'm wondering, you say we don't stick with it, and yet that's what's being offered, and I'm wondering why that is.
So often what we hear about is long-term treatment is really reflecting the need for longer term engagement and a better way of being able to support people as they move from one part of their treatment journey, their recovery journey, to another. So making sure that as people complete a detox, that there's a real warm handoff to the next part of their treatment journey. Those are points that people often have or are at more risk of relapse, and we want to be able to prevent that as much as possible.
So for those who need the long-term treatment, the goal would be to close the gap between detox to residential to post-treatment.
I think it's as not so much closing the gap, but ensure that as they move from one part of a treatment cycle to another, that there's a warm handoff, that there isn't a gap in between there. You're right.
Willerth says a recent budget increase will add 50 transitional beds. Thank you for watching our special coverage on the heavy toll of drug addiction in Saskatchewan. I'm Bonnie Allen, and on this issue, I'll leave the last word to Regina mother Cheryl Deshane, whose son Jordan died of a drug overdose.
Can you just have some compassion? Even just a little bit of compassion. Treat them with dignity and respect. Treat them with the dignity and respect that you would want your son or daughter to receive. Because, God, they are fighting a battle. They are fighting a really hard battle that they might lose. Chances are, lose, and they will pay with their life.